When you want to speak, Mark, just speak to me verbally so I can hear you. I won't have to turn around and look at the screen each time.
Will do.
2 minutes.
I'll point.
That would help. How's Dave today?
Well, yeah.
Good.
I'd ask what's exciting in Saywood, but I already know.
Yeah.
Where's Mr. Rice today? Oh, he's still in
Somewhere in
Alberta.
Alberta,
Right, that's right, yeah. He
incommunicado.
drove to FCM.
Yeah,
Wow, that's adventurous.
Yeah,
yeah, they're somewhere out there, out of contact.
right, yeah.
So I'll stir the pot, get them in trouble, and
Yeah, that sounds fun, yeah.
You're gonna get him in trouble?
Start,
that much.
start everything with Director Rice says to do
yeah,
this.
quote.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll get it after.
Here.
Otherwise, I'll have to adjourn while I go and take a pee.
No.
10 o'clock, we have a quorum. Call Electoral Area Service Committee meeting of June the 12th to order. Chair acknowledges that we're located in traditional territory of the Lachlan people. And the first option or item of business is the adoption of the public agenda.
Chair, I would like to request an item of new business called co-op housing.
All righty, we'll stick that under new business.
What name? What is the name?
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Co-op housing.
Co-op, thank you.
And I would like to move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Second that.
And seconded by Director Benesh. All those in favor? And that
In
is
favor.
carried. No petitions or delegations. Adoption of the previous minutes. A motion, please.
I'll move adoption.
Second,
These
Second.
are the minutes of May 8, 2024. All those in favor?
Yeah.
That's carried. Any business arising? Director Winnie.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a couple of questions for planning staff that arose for me from the Planning Initiatives Project Update Report. If I may ask a few
Go ahead.
questions, is that all right? Okay. The first thing I wanted to touch on was the Area C Master Transportation Plan, which is listed on there. And I just want to say that I believe at this point, the Area C Active Transportation Network Plan may fill the need, at least in the shorter term, for transportation planning on Quadra Island. And my community is really keen to get on with the official community planning process. So I would really like to formally request that there is a pause on the Area C Master Transportation Plan item. And once the official community plan and active transportation network plans are complete, I'd like to revisit the need for an Area C Master Transportation Plan. I'm really mindful of the capacity of the planning department, and that was mentioned at the last meeting, and I want to ensure that the OCP can get underway. So that's
Alrighty.
one of my items. I don't know if I need to have a few thoughts from staff before I go on. No? Okay.
Do we need a motion for that? No, okay.
Okay. My second item of business arising, relating to the same report, is that I was on Reed Island last week for a coffee house, which was really delightful. And it was a Wednesday in early June, and the Hoskin Landing parking lot was so full that there was only way up the side of the road parking available. And in the report, it lists the Hoskin parking tenure application in progress with a completion date of December 2024. I'm just looking for a few more details on that. Like, is this report item strictly discussing the tenure, or does it include the parking lot size upgrade? Are there conversations ongoing with the woodlot owner as well? And what is the perspective of staff on the timeline for the parking lot to be increased in size? That's my second item. does staff want to respond before I carry on with my other questions?
Sure, thank you through the chair. Staff is at the moment completing requirements for the application for the tenure. We have completed our discussions with the woodlot owner. There's to date no issues there. We are proceeding with First Nations consultation and finalizing the rest of the application requirements to formally submit the application. I cannot speak to timing on the end of the province. It has been not as timely as what we would like when we've been looking at some of our other applications, so I cannot speak to that at this time. Perhaps when we get our application formally submitted, they'll be able to give us some more final ideas as to what else might be required or length of time for them to consider the application.
Thank you. So does that, just to clarify, that item that's on the planning list when it says parking tenure application, that's sort of like once the tenure is applied for, then the project can get underway, or there's another process after the tenure application?
Once we are issued tenure, we would have the authority to proceed with whatever works may be required.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, providing that clarity. So I just have a couple of other quick questions. The floodplain mapping that it lists in there, is that for rivers and creeks? Is it specific electoral areas, or is it going to also encompass sea level rise?
Thank you through the chair. I don't have the table in front of me, so I'm not sure exactly which line item you're speaking to, but we are currently proceeding with floodplain mapping specific to Electoral Area D as it relates to both the river and the foreshore as part of a grant application that we've been awarded. Additional floodplain mapping for other areas will be contemplated as funding and resources are made available.
Great, thank you. The Parks Master Plan project, which is listed for Area C, I'm just hoping to confirm that there will be meaningful community engagement opportunities included in this process.
Through the chair, that would be part of the process, yes.
Amazing. And my final quick question is, it lists an Evans Bay Wharf refurbishment. Are there any details that can be shared on what that might entail or mean?
Thank you through the chair. We're currently exploring the requirements for the refurbishment of the wharf. So there's some assessments that are still required in order for us to determine what upgrades are required to bring it to an appropriate service level.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Thank you very much. And those are all my questions from Business Arising. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. All right, no public considerations, no notices of motion. Chair doesn't have a report. We're down to staff reports. Number 1, development permit application, Walker, for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And I think John will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application is to permit construction of a single-family dwelling outside the identifiable Streamside Protection and Enhancement Area, or SPEA, of a property adjacent to Callislide Creek and the ocean. The subject property is designated as residential in the official community plan and is zoned residential 1 in the zoning bylaw. It is surrounded by residential lots north and west and the Strait of Georgia to the east and the south. And the proposed development is permitted by the zoning bylaw. However, as the work is permitted within 30 metres of the top of bank of a watercourse, which is connected to fish habitat, as well as 50 metres from the natural boundary of the sea, it is considered to be within an environmentally sensitive development permit area, and as such, a development permit is required. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. On receipt, anything else? Director Winnie?
Thank you. I did have a question. The map that's attached to that application makes it look like the creek, Caddisfly Creek, is exceptionally straight, quite a way back from the outfall area into the sea. Is the creek all in a culvert to keep it that straight? And is it a fish-bearing stream? I was just curious about that.
Through the chair, yes, the creek is culverted. from the Island Highway all the way, almost as far as the ocean. And that's why it's straight, and it is actually a fish-bearing creek. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information.
On receipt then, all those in favor? And that is carried. And the recommendation. Director Brown, do you want to make the recommendation?
I recommend that, I don't know, the proper wording would
You
be
got it in front of you, just read the wording of it there.
that the report of the chief administrator officer be received.
No, we've done that, the next one.
Okay,
third.
and that the committee recommend the environmental sensitive area development permit DP3D24 Walker as attached in the staff report dated May 8th, 2024 be approved, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the permit.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried.
Yeah.
Number 2, development variance permit Kavanaugh for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And I believe John will speak to this as well.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This application has been sought to permit an existing serviced guest cottage on a concrete foundation to remain in place once a 3-lot plan of subdivision has been created over the property. The subdivision, as proposed, would result in a south side yard setback of 0.1 metres for the guest cottage on proposed Lot B, and the required side yard for residential buildings in the zoning bylaw where the side lot line does not abut a public road is 1.75 metres. Therefore, to permit the proposed subdivision with the existing siting of the guest cottage, a variance is required, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything from directors? Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question for staff. The rezoning application for this property, which came to the board in March 2024, stated that the property is currently developed with a house and outbuilding on the north and east sides of the property. The outbuilding will be moved or removed to bring the structure into compliance with property line setbacks at the time of subdivision. And in that application, there was a drawing included which labeled the outbuilding as an existing shed to be removed. So I'm curious about the variance application that is now labeling the building as an existing serviced guest cottage on a concrete foundation, and just how it went from a shed to be removed to a guest cottage in this short amount of time. And if staff had maybe inquired with the applicants about this shift.
Mr. Chairman, I can attempt to provide an answer to that question. When the application came forward for rezoning, the structure was described as an outbuilding, not as a residence. But when I saw the pictures of it, I realized that it was actually, or could be, a residential structure, judging by its appearance. And therefore, if it were to be used as a residence, if we provided a side yard that would just reflect an outbuilding would be 1 metre and not the 1.75 metres, it seemed prudent to request the variance to 1.75 metres so that the building could be used as a residence if there was a desire to do so.
Thank you. Anything further?
The change in the removing it, that they have changed that.
Oh, right, yes. And the applicants have agreed to move it back to correct yard setbacks. Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That's great. Well, I noticed that the staff recommends that the application for a variance permit be denied. So once we've finished with dispense with receipt, I will be willing to move that motion.
Anything further? Motion, Director Brown. All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 3, development variance permit Clark for receipt.
Move receipt.
I believe Mr. Neal will speak to this as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This application will allow a proposed addition to a garage situated at 3781 Stokes Road, which have the effect of increasing the overall lot coverage to 24%. And although all residential zones within the bylaw allow for 25% lot coverage, in this instance, the variance is required as the property is zoned country residential 4, which stipulates a maximum lot coverage of only 20% for lots less than or equal to 2,500 square meters in size. Currently, the property is developed with an existing residence and a detached garage, and the lot coverage variance has been requested to allow the proponent additional room to store items of hobby interest on this property while providing shelter from the elements. And apart from the lot coverage, all other zoning requirements on the property have been observed. And I'd like to add that no correspondence from neighbours has been received in relation to this proposal, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion from directors? Seeing none, on receipt, all those in favor? That is carried. And a motion, please.
I'd like to put a motion forward that the committee recommend the development variance permit DV 2D24 for Clark as presented in the staff report dated June 12th, 2024 be approved.
Second.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 4, Cortez Island Seepage Management Study for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Mr. Chair, so this was brought to the committee several months ago with the director's request that we take a pause on it so he could consult with some folks on Cortez and think about next steps. We have a couple options available for the director, and we're just looking for further direction.
Thank you. Anything from directors? Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate this report and also appreciate giving me some time to think about it and check in with folks on the island. Once we have received this, I would like to move forward with option B and yeah, I'll say a few more words then.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, on receipt, all those in favor? That is carried. And then Director Vinesh would like to make a motion.
I'd like to move that the regional district proceed with part 2 of the Cortez Septic Management Study using $20,000 from the Growing Communities Fund and $5,000 from Function 340 Liquid Waste Management.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Director Maloney. Any discussion? Director Maloney?
Yeah, just to
Or Director Vinesh, you're first.
Yeah, the study that as presented in this report, I think there are, from further input from the community, I think there are ways to decrease the capital costs on this project and to decrease the operating costs as well. One of the big things I think that's potential excitement for the island is being able to connect marine sewage into this system, and that could increase the tourist destination of Cortez being a place that can handle big boaters and bring more tourism to the island. And secondly, I just want to say that with almost $1 million capital cost on this project, this isn't something that we're going to move forward with right away. We're not going to ask taxpayers to pay that through their land taxes, and that by completing this study, we can have it on the shelf and ready for when the provincial or federal government provides opportunities for infrastructure investment into our communities.
Thank you. Director Maloney, have you got a comment?
Thank you, Chair. And it was really, I was curious if there would be opportunities for marine septic as well, because that does seem to be an area that, at least on Quadra, would be of interest. So I would imagine maybe it would be on Cortez as well.
Yeah, that's obviously something that they'll look at, marine, possibly camping, anything under the heading of, septic discharge.
Calling the question on the motion, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 5, Cortez Island open burning restrictions for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Second by alternate Director Brown.
I believe Mr. Yates has a comment or two on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the report in front of you basically analyzes the requests made by Director Vinesh for some changes to the draft bylaw, and we have evaluated those changes and can recommend, I believe, one of them. I'm sorry, I don't have the report in front of me, but there were a couple of changes that we're not recommending proceed for various reasons, as outlined in the report. And rather than get into it too deeply, respond to questions that may arise.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Yates. Anything further? Director Manish?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Yates. One of the things that I found interesting on the opinion in the report is that the Cortez Fire Department does have the authority under common law to enter the property and respond to fires that threaten adjacent properties. So if someone has a campfire while there's a fire ban, that threatens adjacent property. So in those cases, which is what this bylaw really talks about, they can access the property. So I understand that the regional district cannot delegate that authority, but they do have that authority through the
Common law.
through their common law powers. So, the issue that I have with the bylaw right now is really that, when folks read it, particularly number 5 and 6 in the bylaw, where, the authority to extinguish an open fire. When people read that, they're like, oh, so the manager in Campbell River has the authority to do that. So how exactly is that going to work? We know that the fire department has the authority to do that if it's a threat to public safety, a threat to adjacent properties. So, I would like to either, and I also understand that Nanaimo is in the same position, that they've been able to make this work in some way, and I don't understand the mechanics of that, but they've been able to make it work. And the second one is number 6, the inspection of property. Again, it's just not realistic that someone from Campbell River is going to come over if someone's, breaking this fire ban on Cortez. So I'm really looking for options to make this bylaw something that is really, makes sense on the ground, and whether that's removing number 5 and 6. So we don't have to talk about the delegation of authority because the fire department already has that in case of public safety issues. Love thoughts from you, Tom, or any other staff.
Mr. Yates?
Thank you. So it may well be that removal of those sections might be the answer, because we must keep in mind this is a regulatory bylaw. It really does not affect or influence the authority of the fire chief under common law to deal with situations that are a threat to public safety or property. And I think the way, the context in which it is currently in the bylaw may leave the wrong impression as to the purpose of it and who is responsible for doing whatever. So it may well be that removal is the best way to go on this, but I would have to look at that in the context of what the bylaws are trying to achieve. As I understand it, the intent is to have a bylaw that allows for, in certain times of the year when the province has not enacted or has ceased to use the fire bans, then this bylaw would come into place and be operative. So I think it may well be the removal of those sections is the best overall response.
So would it be appropriate to defer this to the next meeting and bring it back and a little different?
If that's the committee's wish, we can certainly do that, yes.
Director Manish?
And if I may, Mr. Chair, yeah, that would, if you could defer it to the next meeting, and I agree with Tom. I think the solution may be that we just remove those sections. However, I just want to ensure that we're able to do that, that it doesn't incur greater liability, because if we remove, let's say, the manager, like that, we've delegated somebody that is an employee. I get it, right? Where that employee doesn't reside on Cortez. So if we remove the manager, to me, the whole paragraph is moot, right? Like, because you're not delegating anybody. So just remove it. And I just want to see if there's any liability consequence to removing that. Or are we obligated to delegate somebody even though it is not really practical that they're not going to be going over there?
All right, so Director Manish, do you want to move to defer it to the next meeting, take a look at it again?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that, Mr. Yates, and also Mr. Leach. Yeah, I would like to defer it to the next, make a motion to defer it to the next EASC meeting, allowing staff to assess whether number 5 and 6 can be removed. And, if there are still complications, that they check in with the Nanaimo Regional District and see how they've been able to make this work.
Seconder?
Second.
By Director
Second.
Winnie. All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 6, Clahous First Nation Fire Protection Agreement for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Mr. Yates will speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This apparently has been an agreement that's been worked on for a fair amount of time by Mr. Koopman. My understanding is that the discussions have included the membership of the Cortes Island Firefighters Association as well. And we have been offering apparently some level of service on a monthly basis. I'm not sure exactly where, how that has been provided in light of the current proposal. I suspect it's similar, but there were a lot of details to be worked out, and I believe those have been worked out. The Clahous has basically signed off on this agreement, and as far as I'm aware, the Firefighters Association in Cortez is also in agreement. Now, once this agreement is signed off, assuming it is, then I believe we'll have to come back and make a small amendment to the existing agreement that we have with the Firefighters Association, which is really just a mechanical thing.
Thank you. Anything further, Director Manish?
Thank you, Mr. Yates, and I really appreciate Mr. Koopman's efforts here in engaging Clahous First Nations and CIFA in getting this proposal forward. I'm really excited to see this. We had a big fire at Clahous last year that almost took out their health center, and the fire department managed to save it, but they still lost 3 dwelling units in that fire. So the need is obviously there, and it's great to see that there's agreement on both sides here. And just a note for the public that the previous agreement was having Clahous First Nation pay $5,000 a year for this service, and that's now been increased to $16,000 a year, which I think is much more in line with the services that are provided. Just really appreciate everyone's efforts, and I'm prepared to move option A.
Okay, on receipt, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. And the motion, Director Vanesh.
I'd like to move that the committee recommend that the proposed contract for provision of fire protection services to the Clahous First Nation be approved by the board.
So moved, or second, sorry.
Second by Director Mawhinney. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 7 is Hayward Valley Fire Hall Renovations Contract Award for receipt.
Move receipt.
Move receipt. Second.
Any discussion? I'll just say Area A Director's in favor of this.
And nothing from staff then.
All those in favor of receipt? That's carried. And someone make the motion, please.
I'll move B, that the committee recommend that the contract for the Hayward Valley Fire Hall renovations be awarded to Advanced Builders and Contractors based on its response to RFP 0224, and that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the contract.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 8, request for financial assistance, Hayward Futures.
Move
for
receipt.
Seconder,
Second.
Director Nash. Discussion?
Nothing from staff, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. And a motion, please.
I will move B, that the committee recommend that a grant and aid for the Hayward Futures Society in the amount of $1,500 to assist with costs of the 2024 Canada Day celebrations be paid from the Electoral Area A grant and aid budget.
Seconder, please.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that is carried. Bylaws. Number 1, Bylaw 552, Electoral Area D rezoning, Lojoweski. For receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And a motion?
Put a motion forward that, no, where is it?
It's on here.
Oh, there it is there. That as a notice was given in accordance with S4671, the Local Government Act. The committee recommend the bylaw 553 McEwen be forwarded. Pardon me, sorry?
It's 552.
Oh, 552. Be forwarded to the board for the first, second, and third readings and final adoption.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? See none, all those in favor? That's carried. Number 2, bylaw 553, electoral area D rezoning McCowan.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Dr. Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question for staff. I believe that at least, and I don't know if the rules are similar in Area D and Area C, there's road frontage regulations, and that I recall, I believe, that there was 10% road frontage required. So I'm just curious how this little lot, which is dividing up its cul-de-sac road frontage, is that still work for the amount of road frontage that's required?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can answer that question. Yes, the subdivision of this property will trigger the need for frontage relief because there'll be less than the 10% of the perimeter of each of those lots now fronting on a public road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Anything further? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's carried. And the motion.
I put a motion forward that note, as notice given in accordance with S 4671 of the Local Government Act, the committee recommended the bylaw 553 McEwen be forwarded to the board for first, second, and third readings and final adoption.
Second.
Discussion? See none. All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 3, bylaw number 563, electoral area B, short-term rental amendments for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
I believe planning will speak to this.
Thank you, through the chair. The bylaws in front of you are in response to the requirements from the province to contemplate short-term rentals within an electoral area's zoning bylaw. We have taken the results from the surveys that we had done as part of the electoral area B zoning bylaw review and the direction of the board to opt in to the principal residence requirement to provide amendments to the existing zoning bylaw to contemplate short-term rentals within the bylaw and to permit them as an accessory to a principal residential use. You will find there's some updated definitions in the bylaw to be in line with the provincial definitions and to be consistent with other zoning bylaws that we are currently amending at this time.
Thank you for that. Anything from directors? Director
Oh, we're
Vanash?
still on receipt. Thank you, Annika. I really appreciate moving this forward and engaging the community in getting their responses on short-term rental regulation on Cortez. I'm excited to see that short-term rentals will be allowed in all zones on Cortez. I think that's a clear mandate from the community. Short-term rentals bring in a significant amount of revenue for tourism to our community, and I think it's great that property owners can leverage their assets and earn an income. I know a lot of people on Cortez. That's how they make it work and how they're able to live here. I'm also glad that we're moving forward with the primary residence requirement. And we're closing the door to off-islanders purchasing land here as an investment and turning it into an Airbnb business. And I just want to clarify, just for layman's terms, Annika, that basically what we're saying is here is that the short-term rentals are allowed in all zones on Cortez. However, they still need to meet the primary residence requirement.
Thank you, through the chair. It is the zoning bylaw does not necessarily regulate the user, but given the language contained within the amendment bylaw, it would require short-term rentals to be accessory to a residential use. So the residential use would have to be in play before the short-term rental could be contemplated, and then the province would come in and regulate the principal residence requirement. But certainly this amendment to the zoning bylaw would require the residential use as the principal use prior to the accessory short-term rental use.
Thank you. Annika, would you mind just explaining that in sort of a bit more layman's terms, the accessory use part, and how that would play out in a practical way?
Thank you, through the chair. Should there be a situation where a dwelling unit is being used as a commercial short-term rental without having someone residing there for full-time residential use, it would be determined that that use would not be accessory to a residential use. It would be commercial, and therefore only a commercial only a commercial use would be operating over the property, and therefore it would be non-compliant with the zoning bylaw and also non-compliant with the principal residence requirement of the province. So in short order, somebody has to be using the residence as a principal residence or for full-time residential use prior to being able to have a short-term rental component over the property.
Thank you. And is there any, sort of grandfathering that happens, or is this affects everybody however they have it in place right now?
Yeah, thank you. As part of the updates to the legislation, they have, they have removed the grandfathering clause as it relates to short-term rentals. So regardless of how a property may have been operating prior to the legislation, their grandfathering or legal nonconformity is no longer in effect, and they must be compliant with the new legislation. I think that's as clear as I can be.
Thank you,
Okay.
Echo. I really appreciate it. I'm prepared to move forward with this and accept it.
On receipt, all those in favor? It's carried. And motion for B,
I'd like to move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 563, being Cortes Island zoning bylaw 2002, amendment number 34, be forwarded to the board for first and second reading.
Second.
second. Discussion, all those in favor? That is carried. And the third
I'd like to
motion,
move that the committee recommend that the board authorize a public hearing to consider bylaw number 563, and that the public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
Second.
thank you. Mr. Mooney, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 4, bylaw number 564, electoral area C, short-term rental amendments for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion,
May I?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm really happy to see this report and to see that we're moving ahead on the short-term rental legislation, and also really excited to see the final results of the short-term rental survey of March. I'm so impressed to know that there were 406 responses to the Area C survey. It really speaks to how important this topic is to so many islanders and the social sharing and community conversation which took place about this survey. I'm hoping to ask, just to get a little bit information about where the definition of tourist accommodation originates from. Is this a generally accepted definition used in other bylaws, or which ones? And I guess just for clarity, like, I'm not a bylaw writer and I'm learning to be a bylaw reader. And I do think it's really important that definitions are super clear for the public to understand and differentiate between these 3 different types of accommodations which are being defined. And the definition for tourist accommodation is temporary accommodation for transient guests and excludes short-term rentals or bed and breakfasts. And I'm just not sure if maybe the difference between a short-term rental and tourist accommodation is the type of ownership. It talks about commercially operated being a tourist accommodation, and it talks about homeowner for bed and breakfast, but doesn't seem to be a definition for that for short-term rentals. So I'm just curious about the definition of tourist accommodation, and then I'm also curious that it is excluding campsites and campgrounds, because we have 3 resort or tourist accommodations on Quadra Island which have campgrounds in them. So why does it exclude those? I don't understand why it would exclude campgrounds.
Thank you, through the chair. This is the tourist accommodation definition is a consistent definition. It is used across all of our zoning bylaws. And it is used to differentiate between what would be a tourist, commercial type operation and what would be a short-term rental. I think you had spoken to who the owner is. No, it has nothing to do with that. It is the principal use that would determine whether or not, and the configuration of that use that would determine whether or not whatever is operating on that parcel meets the definition of a short-term rental or tourist accommodation. Tourist accommodation would include all of those items that it lists within the definition, including resorts and such. It specifically excludes campsites and campgrounds because those are differentiated and they're defined separately within the bylaw. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Could you, do the campgrounds have a separate definition or do they have a separate zone? Could you clarify that for me? Because I don't see campgrounds in my copy of the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. At this time, the zoning bylaw does not contemplate campgrounds or campsites, and therefore they're not defined.
Well, my follow-up question is why are we making them illegal by excluding them from this definition of tourism?
Thank you through the chair. They're always excluded as a form of tourist accommodation because they're not a unit. A tourist accommodation has to be a unit, not a traveling tent or RV or camper or van or.
Okay, that helps me. That actually helps me quite a bit. So, because I was curious, one of my other questions was, is there a number of public campsites on a property which make it a campground?
Thank you through the chair. There has been a bylaw that was contemplated a number of years ago that was going to contemplate campgrounds and define them and limit them to a specific number, but that bylaw was never adopted.
We good?
I have one more question.
Okay.
Thank you. The other question that I was curious about is that the BC government defines accommodations, defines short-term rentals as accommodations provided to members of the public in a host property in exchange for money for a period of less than 90 consecutive days. And in this bylaw, we're defining a short-term rental as the renting of a dwelling unit or portion thereof to the traveling public. And it includes bed and breakfasts. I'm just curious if for the decision to choose the words dwelling unit rather than accommodation, and if in doing so, we need to define dwelling unit in the bylaw.
Dwelling is defined. It's just not dwelling unit, but dwelling is defined.
Okay, so that's good then.
Thank you through the chair. I believe we're solid.
Thank you very much. And I just would have one final thought, which I for my own reading and possibly for the public who's following along, it'd be really helpful to receive reports which contemplate bylaw changes with a red line version, so it's easier to compare the before and after.
Thank you, that's a good point, and we do that where we are typically making changes to a bylaw or omitting language. In this case, these are, I think, all mostly just by inserting new definitions, so not removing or omitting language that's currently contained within the bylaw, but duly noted, thank you.
Okay, on receipt, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. And the motion, Director Winnie.
Thank you, Chair. I will move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 564, being Quadra Island zoning bylaw 1990, amendment number 149, be forwarded to the board for first and second readings.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Further motion, Director Winnie.
Thank you, Chair. I will move that the committee recommend that the board authorize a public hearing to consider bylaw number 564 and that the public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
All those in favor?
Seconded.
Second by alternate Director Brown. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And number 5, bylaw 565, electoral area D, short-term rental amendments for receipt.
I move the receipt.
Second.
Discussion, anyone? See none. All those in favor? That is carried. And the motion, Director Brown.
A motion that the committee recommend the bylaw 565 being Kemba River Area Zoning Bylaw 1991, amendment number 75, be forwarded to the board for first and second readings.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. And a further motion?
Further motion that the committee recommend that the board authorize a public hearing to consider bylaw 565 and that the public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. All right. Correspondence, Director Squares, new business, addendum items. We have an addendum item?
We have new business.
Oh, we have new business. Yes. Thank you. Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. So I do have an item of new business, which is just around co-op housing. And you all may have noticed that last week, Housing Minister Sean Fraser announced that a $1.5 billion investment in co-op housing will be happening. And co-op housing is definitely having a resurgence of interest as a way of achieving attainable housing. And I'm interested to see if the Strathcona Region District could play a role in accessing co-op housing funding and work to provide it in our rural communities. So I do have a motion, if I may.
Is the staff any comments on this? Or? No? All right. Go ahead with your motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that staff provide a report on co-op housing and the possibilities of accessing grant funding to further explorations of attainable housing opportunities for rural areas of the Strathcona Regional District.
I'll second that.
Second by Director Vanesh. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, now we're down to the addendum item. So need a motion to consider the addendum.
I'll move consideration of the addendum.
Second.
By Director Vanesh, all those in favor? That's carried. Go ahead, Director Mawini. Outer Discovery Island Solid Waste Management Study for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. And do you have item B, if you'd like to make a motion, Director Mawini, then we can discuss it?
Oh, I have to make a motion before I discuss it?
That would be appropriate, yeah.
Okay. Okay, well then, my motion is that the committee, well, I had a question for staff before I wanted to
All
make
right,
my motion.
go
Is it
ahead,
okay if I do
I
it?
should have done that in receipt and I forgot, sorry.
Okay. Whew, I'm like, wow, just 0 to 90 here. I mentioned earlier that I was at a coffee house at Surge Narrows last week, and one of the topics which was discussed was solid waste. And during the conversation, it became clear that Expecting a functional service on the outer islands would be challenging for many reasons, including the need for residents of one island to have to visit another, and that most and all boats are heading to their vehicles at Hoskin Landing. And one of the things that I was asked is if it would be possible to have a dumpster at Hoskin Landing for outer islanders to access. I can visualize that it could be pretty challenging to organize, as parking there is definitely at a premium these days. And it would need to be locked, and there would have to be a code or something. I'm not sure entirely if this is something which staff could entertain examining as part of this study and report. But as it was asked of me, I'm bringing it here for staff's input.
Well, we can certainly look at that as a way of, collection on the other islands. You're thinking about if there's a dumpster there and people can access it, and then that dumpster is collected on some kind of frequency. We can bring that up at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting. I wouldn't categorize that maybe as collection, so it would likely fall under the Solid Waste Management Service, because then they would just go collect that dumpster. Maybe not. We'll bring it up for sure at the solid waste and see, whose umbrella that would land under. And if it's ours, we can certainly bring something back and explore what the cost for that. I mean, we can do anything. It's just how much it's going to cost. And then if there's any hurdles or obstacles in there, we'll make you aware of them. As I think at the same time, we were exploring additional options as well, like a once or twice a year annual cleanup. So we can certainly add that to the list.
Thank you.
Correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
absolutely. I'm hoping that we will be doing that, and that's actually part of my motion, which is around advocacy, because I definitely learned from the conversation that I had that an annual recycling pickup event for large items would be very interesting to folks out there. And they was actually raised also that even possibly larger than large items, like larger than a fridge, like for instance, old rusty vehicle parts. How do those get recycled, and how do they ever get, off the island? So, once something lands on Reed Island, it is quite challenging to recycle, especially heavy, bulky things. So, if I shall read my motion now? Chair?
Just make a comment that
Yeah.
if I skip over you in the future, don't hesitate to interrupt me. If I go to call the questions, just say, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay,
something
well,
before.
because it wasn't an addendum, I wasn't totally sure what was going on.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, go ahead with your
great.
motion.
Okay, well, I would like to move that the committee recommend advocacy for enhanced disposal options, including establishing a solid waste transfer station on Quadra Island, and advocacy for an annual extended producer responsibility event to facilitate material collection initiatives within the outer Discovery Islands. And that a solid waste dumpster at Hoskin Landing be explored for use by outer Discovery Islanders, with the cost being shared by resident participants, if that makes sense to you. And then the last part I added.
Sure. Okay, well, I'll see if somebody will second it. Or I just have a comment there. So there's a combination of advocacy in there, and then there's things that the regional district would or could do, like the annual, like an annual collection similar to Sayward Valley. That collection doesn't fall under the solid waste management function, the Comox Strathcona. So I'm fine with the motion like this, just as I understand that we can do advocacy and we can look at solutions internally ourselves that don't fall under the solid waste management umbrella. And collection isn't one of those, which is fine. But that's more than just advocacy. We'll look at solutions for that as well.
Well, I'm hoping for advocacy and solutions.
Yeah, okay, perfect, yeah.
Yeah, Area A had asked for transportation in the past and it was turned down, so we'd have this other option that works really well for us.
I guess I was sort of taking the wording because in the report that was deferred from May, it does recommend advocacy for extended producer responsibility events. So maybe
No, this is fine. I think we all understand. There's a combination of advocacy and bringing options forward. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
All righty, do we have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Dr. Vinesh, anything further on the question? All those in favor? And that is carried. Okay, closed session. We need a motion for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second by Director Vanesh. All those in favor? Carried. And the motion.
I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public to consider matters deemed to fall within the parameters of subsections 91 I, N, and O of the Community Charter.
Second that.
Second by alternate Director Brown. All those in favor? And that is carried. All righty, so we'll move